Hey guys, so this is our chance to talk about your formative assessment from yesterday. So I have so many things on the side here. Okay, here's my text box. All right, so the first two questions we have here, and they were labeled this way on your Kia as well, they were labeled as molecular. So you didn't have to consider if they were molecular or ionic, you were just told. So the first one we have is diboron trioxide, and so we see some prefixes in there. So we know we don't have to do any looking up of charges because it's not ionic. We have prefixes to help us. So we know that boron is B, or we can look it up on a periodic table. We know that di means 2. So diboron, we have 2 borons, or B2. And then I have trioxide. So tri means 3, and oxide is going to be for oxygen. So the symbol for oxygen is O, which I can double check on my periodic table if I need to, and I know that tri is 3. So diboron trioxide, your response should be B2O3. If we are given the formula, like in N4O, and it's molecular, like it stated it was, we need to include our prefixes. The only time we would not include a prefix is if the first element only has 1 atom. So in this case, our first element is nitrogen, and there are 4 atoms of it. So we would say tetra nitrogen. And then for O, oxygen, we would change it to oxide, and there's only 1 of it, and we do use mono on the second element. So if there was only 1 at the beginning, we would not say mono nitrogen. Mono is the only one we don't use on the first element. We use all of our prefixes, all of the rest of them on our other words. So tetranitrogen, monoxide, we had to use prefixes because they were molecular or covalent. Okay, so then we had a couple where you were told that it is ionic. So we have magnesium iodide, and we know that there are no prefixes to tell us how many magnesiums there are or how many iodines there are. So we have to look up the charges like we have been learning. So let's put a text box here actually. So first I have magnesium, okay, Mg. Magnesium is in group 2, so it has a +2 charge. And then next I have iodine, which again I can use my periodic table to know that its symbol is I and that its charge is -1. We want those to equal 0, and they do not. So that's when I can use my crisscross method to tell me that I need 2 iodines and I need 1 magnesium. So my formula would be, again, I need 1 magnesium. If you really want to put the 1 there, you can, but we know it's not needed and it's technically not correct, but if you want the 1 there, you can. And then we have I for iodine, and we need 2 of those. So MgI2 for magnesium iodide. Again, there was nothing in the name that told you you needed 2 iodines. You had to take the extra step of looking up the charges. The other ionic compound we have says CaS. So we are just naming it. Ca is calcium. S is sulfur, which we turn into sulfide. And we will not use prefixes because they are ionic. So ionic compounds don't use prefixes, again, because they don't need prefixes. They have the charges that we can look at to figure out how many we would need. We can't do that for molecular, so that's why we have to use the prefixes for those. Okay, so in the next section, so these were the ones on your Kia that were labeled unknown. and it told you that you needed to decide first if it's molecular or ionic, and then use the correct rules depending on if it's molecular or ionic. So first let's go through and label these. So I've got barium nitride first. So there are a couple of ways I know that it is ionic. First, I know it's ionic because there aren't any prefixes there. And secondly, I know it's ionic because the first element listed there, barium, is a metal. Where do we find the metals? On the left of our periodic table. So I know that one's ionic. Number 6, phosphorus trifluoride. Again, if I see a prefix, I know it's molecular. I know I don't need to look up any charges because it's already telling me how many I need. I also know it's covalent or molecular because the first element is phosphorus, which happens to be a non-metal. So as long as that first element is not a metal, I know it's molecular. Okay. On the other side, so I have C2O, so carbon and oxygen. In order to determine if it's molecular or ionic, I need to look at that first element and decide, is it a metal or a non-metal? So we have C, which is carbon. Carbon is a non-metal. It's to the right of the staircase on our periodic table. So since it's a non-metal, and then I'm going to deem it a molecular compound. And then next I have CaBr2. I've got Ca first, which is calcium. Calcium is a metal. It's to the left of the staircase. And if there's a metal first, I know it is ionic. So keeping in mind our list of rules to kind of remind us. So we have CSPN, so covalent, share electrons, we use prefixes, and they have non-metals. That's my molecular rules. And then for ionic, I have ITOM. So I have I for ionic, T for transfer electrons, the O has the slash through it for no prefixes, and the M stands for metal first. So just like in number 8, since there was a metal first, that is in ITOM, ionic. Okay, so that's important to do when you look at each of these if it says unknown. Then of course we have to actually write either the name or the formula. So with number 5, since it's ionic, and since there are no prefixes, I have to look up those charges. So for barium, if I look on my periodic table, I see its symbol is Ba, its charge is +2. For nitride or nitrogen, its symbol is N, its charge is -3. So now it's time for me to type that as its actual formula, if I can. So Ba3N2, because we have to do our crisscross since they don't equal 0. Next, I have phosphorus trifluoride. I don't have to look up any charges because there's a prefix in there. So that means I have 1 phosphorus and 3 fluorides or fluorines. And fluorine is just F, not FL. So I can double check that on my periodic table if I need to. Over here, I'm going to write some names out. So since C2O is molecular, that means I do use my prefixes, right? CSPN, the P is prefixes. So I'm going to say dicarbon monoxide. For my prefixes. And then since CaBr2 is ionic, since the first element is a metal, and again in ITOM, the O with the slash means no prefixes. So I'm just going to say calcium bromide. And we know that that kind of is weird because we see that 2 and it makes us think, well, do we have to show that in the name? Nope, you don't, because again, if someone needed to go the opposite way, all they would have to do is look up the charges and make sure that they equal 0. So there are your answers to yesterday's formative assessment on Kia with an explanation of why as well. Thanks for listening.